So hi, thank you for inviting us. I'm Doug Kaufman. I'm the creative director for Star Trek Fleet Command, the Digit Scopely main product. I've brought two colleagues with me from Digit because we wanted to talk about how they got their first jobs in the industry. Now, I myself will not be telling you how I got my first job in the industry, because that was so many decades ago that it is irrelevant to you. But these two guys are both TU Dublin graduates. And so how they got their first jobs is extremely relevant to you. And we're going to have them tell their tales and give you a little advice based on those tales. And then at the end, I'll come back and just kind of wrap things up and give you the vision from across the table as the hiring manager of what they say and what kind of we think of in terms of taking new graduates for associate design positions. So first up, I'll introduce our elder statesman of narrative design, Paul Fahey.
That is the greatest title I've ever had, and I will not settle for anything else on my next contract, Doug, so remember that. Before I start, I just want to quickly begin with a huge congratulations to the students that I met showing off their games earlier on. It is not that long ago since I was here showing off my own final year project. John remembers the nightmare I put him through trying to get that on the floor. So congratulations, everyone. I know how intimidating it is. I know how nerve-wracking it is. Well done. So how to stumble into the games industry. I would love to tell you that I got into the games industry through good connections, hard work, but it was, for me, a lot of luck and a lot of stumbling into the right people at the right time. But I am going to try and give you a brief introduction of who I am, how, what I did, what my path was to the industry, and how I got into it, the mistakes I made, how you can hopefully avoid them, and the best pieces of advice I gathered through my journey. So, first of all, who is this guy with the weird facial hair and why should I care? I'm Paul. I am a narrative designer in Digit, as Doug likes to call me, the elder narrative designer. I have been with Digit for 5 years. I graduated straight from TU Dublin, back when it was DIT, and came straight into Digit as an associate game designer. And I've worked my way up from there to my position now as narrative designer with the company on Star Trek Fleet Command. But it was far from a short and easy journey. I started off right here in Pulse in Dublin. Actually, he was taught by John. Then I came with him to TU Dublin. And from there, I met the amazing folks at Gambrinus. Anyone here who knows Colin Larkin and the Gambrinus team, they are the nicest people in the world. And I worked with them on their incredible Cardpocalypse. Go buy it on Steam. It is way cheaper than it should be. It's amazing. And from there, I went on to work on Star Trek Fleet Command. Hopefully everyone here plays that game, and if not, why not? It's very, very good, and the storylines and the writing is fantastic. And right now, I am also a member of the IMERT board. We, in our clandestine operations to take over the world, improve the industry for all the workers inside. So if anybody has any questions about IMERT or any suggestions, please do bring them to me. We're always looking for ideas to improve the industry. But how did I get my start? I actually started as a games programmer. I wanted nothing more in the world than to work in Unity and to code games. And I worked my way up to that, and I studied computer science. In fact, up until I got my first job as a games programmer, where I realized that I was very, very bad and I should stop doing it. So from that point, I kind of went back to my original passion of game design. I started making my own games. I started just going into Unity and rapid prototyping. I started writing short stories, writing poems, writing songs, anything I could to strengthen my knowledge of narrative structure and game design theory. And that's my first point that I'm going to give you advice on. Just get into Unity, start making things, because that was the turning point for my entire career, was when I realized that I can just start making stuff. Nobody can stop me. Nobody can tell me what I can't make. And that is a dangerous thought process, but it's also a really good one. And halfway through about 2 years of applying to every single job I could, interviewing for every single role I could, getting rejected by a good dozen or so companies, I eventually landed my lucky break in the most Irish way possible, in a pub. I met a lovely product manager by the name of Vicky when drinking in Berlin one weekend, and she happened to work for Digit, and we happened to really hit it off and made good friends. And that led to me getting the job at Digit. So point number 2 that I'm going to bring you to, the importance of networking and social events like this one. State of Play and its associated events, especially the one the TU Dublin does a fantastic job of running these social events, is where you're going to meet a lot of the industry professionals that are hiring. And this is why they come to these things, to find the new talent, the fresh blood that's going to inject life into the industry. So come to as many of these as you can, meet as many of these people as you can. That's how I got my job in the end, at the end of the day. Then meeting Vicky and getting the opportunity was only the first step. I had to interview. I had to do the test. I had to ready my portfolio, and I had to interview. This slide is in the wrong order. Pretend you didn't see that for a second. This is my 4 pillars of a portfolio, and this is how I brought my portfolio from to good. First pillar, we have relevant, recent, concise, and consistent. Now, these sound like buzzwords, and they mostly are. But relevant. Make sure that your portfolio is being tailored to the job that you're applying for. If you're applying for a 4K MMO strategy game like Star Trek Fleet Command and your portfolio is entirely dating sims, I mean, respect, but at the same time, it's not relevant to the job you're applying for. Try and tailor what you're sending in to the company, to the genre that you're applying for. Recent. I learned very quickly that people did not want to see my games from 10 years ago. They want to see things that I've made recently to showcase my current skill base, how I've improved in the years. Keep things as recent as possible. Concise. 2 strong games for me got me a job better than 12 mediocre games. That was the best advice that I got from one of my amazing lecturers, was keep my portfolio concise. And consistent, make sure that everything is of a consistent quality. Pick your best pieces, and that will land you at least an interview. Now for interviewing, I am cutting into Gary's time, so I'm going to speed run this. Always do your homework. Research the job you're applying for. Keep your answers short and sweet. Interviewers hate waffle. Keep your answers relevant. Tangents can break the flow of conversation. Try to engage in conversation. This is one thing that always works well for me because I don't shut up. A little bit of banter goes a long way in an interview. Ask the interviewer questions about the project. This is really important. Remember, you are interviewing the company as much as they are interviewing you. Know your strengths, know your value, and that will lead to jobs. And also never undersell yourself. Then some pieces of advice that I got from friends, colleagues, and lecturers from here in TUD. Your portfolio should showcase the best of your work. 2 high-quality pieces are better than 12 mediocre ones. I got that advice from a lecturer named Charlene, and that changed my entire hiring process. That got me a job in the end. When possible, tailor your portfolio and application to the job you're applying for. I already talked about this. Board games are an underrated portfolio piece, and I know Doug will agree with me on this one. Show pictures of board games. Show paper prototypes. That's really, really good stuff. Bring up the company's work as much as possible. If you're in your interview, talk about the games they've made. Talk about the work they've done. That's gonna show them that you're committed. And for writers, specifically for your writers out there, include samples of your written work. This is something that I didn't do in the beginning, and again, changed the way I looked at applications. And don't ignore less flashy areas. Dialogue is great, but put some barks in there. Throw some tool tips, some item descriptions. Things like that can show your world building in very, very small pieces. And I believe, do I have anything else? No, I don't have anything else. So, but all of this for me is not extremely recent. I graduated from TUT 5 years ago, which, if I understand pop culture correctly, makes my experience about as relevant as Beanie Babies. So I'm going to pass you on to someone who has much more recent experience in the hiring process, my incredibly talented game design colleague, Gary, and he's going to talk you through his journey as well. Thank you very much, everyone.
Sorry, I need to get my notes. Yeah, so hey everyone, as Paul alluded to, my name is Gary. I graduated here pretty much yesterday. It was only like 2 years ago now. And now I'm an associate systems designer at Digit. So I'm gonna basically take this in a kind of different approach. Paul did a great job going through like the interview process and all that. I found most difficult was actually getting to the interview, trying to figure out what jobs to apply to and kind of that. So I'm just going to lead you through my journey from when I started. So after I graduated, I applied to kind of similar events, Paul. Every design, production, QA job I could find. I got 0 responses. And that was like disheartening, but so I tried to like change my strategy a bit. And so I continued applying, but now I would apply and I'd send a message to the hiring manager or the recruiter or whoever I could see was related to the company. And then like my went from 0 to like 2 responses, so it worked out really well. But but along with that, a lot of times I get fantastic advice about like how to improve either my CV or portfolio, how to like actually go about the process better, or they point me in the direction of a different company that was going to be hiring, or in really good cases, hiring soon, and I was able to like get ahead of the actual process. So then I continued with this, and then I was getting such good advice and stuff. I was like, I should just be messaging anybody in the industry I've ever talked to and kind of continue this process. So anyone who ever talked to you asked like for advice, and if I knew they are the company at the moment, are you going to be hiring recently? I can do cool design things. And kind of from this is where I actually got my first interview at, or my first internship at Wardux. I messaged Nikki, she was the CEO of Wardux. About a year before that, they came in for one day and they did a play test with us. And we play tested their game and gave feedback. 100% she did not remember me. Well, she remembered that she came, and I just mentioned that I met her there. I kind of went through that. I'm looking for a job. I just graduated. These are my results. Don't mind them. And if you have any design positions or anything, any internship coming up, I'd be really, really interested. And I didn't get a response. And then 2 months later, she came back and was like, if you're still interested, if you're still interested in the internship, send your details on. And then there was a bit of back and forth. I sent on my CV and portfolio, and then I somehow got an internship at Wardux. No, you don't need to apply that. Yeah, so I suppose that there's a ton of luck involved, but the one thing you can actually like have an effect on is you can't control like the outcome of the dice, but you control how many times you roll it. Keep applying, keep at it, keep persistent. It can be a really, really tough process. I think it's not talked about. Most of my mates that like graduate with me that are in the industry now, the average time is like 6+ months they're looking for a job. And I'm not saying that to demoralize you, but it's just like kind of the reality of it. And it's reality for me, it's reality for everyone. It's just the way it is, and don't get disheartened. Just keep at it and it'll get easier. And that's kind of another point I'd like to just address. Like applying for a job is a process. Kind of if you treat it as you treat make it a game. Try get better at applying for jobs as you continue applying for jobs. Do like a mini post-mortem after you do an application, like what went wrong, what could I have did better. Because if I look at my like CV and portfolio from when I first like graduated, compared to like when I first got my internship at Wardux, it was a big like difference in quality. Not even of like the projects, but just of how information is presented and points like that. And then if I even compare my stuff when I applied to Wardux to when I actually applied to Digit, the job I have now, another big gap in quality. So just keep, I guess, keep analyzing what you're actually applying. Don't just throw your stuff out there and hope. As kind of coming back to Paul's points, Paul's great points. Just keep coming back to them. 2 pieces on your portfolio, better than 12 okay pieces. 2 really good applications are going to be 50 okay applications that you just piss out on a Sunday. Just dedicate yourself to what you actually think you have a chance and what you're passionate about, and I think you'll have a much better chance. And I'll leave it to Doug for words of wisdom.
Right. All right, thank you, Paul and Gary, for coming with me and being far more entertaining than I will be. But I want to kind of wrap up by pointing out a couple of common threads, some of which are obvious and some may not be quite as obvious, in how they got where they are and how I hear what they're saying and think about the fact that, for instance, Gary got his somehow job as an intern because of me. So here's what I think of as the hiring manager. I think it's pretty clear from what they were talking about that some very important things include network your portfolio and perseverance. So networking, I think both gentlemen used the word luck, but Gary pointed it out. You can't control what comes up on the dice, but you can control how many times you roll them. And networking is one way of rolling lots of dice all at once, because every time you meet someone, they know people who know people. And like you said, they may not remember you specifically, but they will remember the venue in which they met you. And it's not just that they will have a job someday for you. They will know someone who might have a job for you, or they will know that they're going to be hiring in a couple of months. So the more people you know, the less luck it really is, and the more it's just a numbers game. When will it come up? You can't control that either, and it can take 6 months or 2 years, or it could be the day after you graduate. But knowing people is maybe your best way of getting access to the industry, shall we say. Now, the portfolio, it's interesting. In my day, in the early half of my career, there were no game design colleges. And so a portfolio for a game designer was more difficult to evaluate objectively. Nowadays, though, portfolios are much more important. And I totally agree that I would rather see one even good project that you worked on that you can talk intelligently to than a bunch of small things. Because what I'm really interested in when I'm looking at the games that you're demonstrating or your portfolio is, what do you understand about what you did? Some of those you might not have even worked on alone. What was your part? And presumably you kind of understand the design theory that went into it, and that's what I want to hear from you. When I was at a company in Seattle, Washington, in the States, we went to a game design college very similar to this one and saw the products that the fourth years had done. And 3 of them really stood out. And I talked to those students and they understood what they had done. They were able to tell me why they made the choices they made. And that was enough for us to bring them in for interviews. And it may feel like the interview is the last and least important step. And of course, you have to get that interview. So that's very important. But the interview really does matter. And we ended up hiring one of them, right, pretty much out of college. He moved on in about a year. And so we went back to that pool and hired a second one. So the portfolio is really important, even though I had to get used to that over time. And obviously, perseverance. That's what's about rolling the dice over and over and over again. No matter how low the percentage, if you roll them enough times and you have enough webs going out in the networking, sooner or later, you'll get where you need to go. Now, they do say in any creative endeavor that you should love what you're doing or you shouldn't be doing it. And so as a former acting student myself, the advice was, it's really tough out there. There's a lot of people and not many jobs. I think that's probably better for designers than it was for actors, but it still means that it's going to take time. And keep in mind that 99 out of 100 times that you don't get a position or even an interview, it has nothing to do with you. It's not because you were inadequate in some way. It's just circumstances. And those circumstances will come in your favor sooner or later. So you got to be ready. And that's where their advice comes in about doing good work on your portfolio and on your applications. So just in the interests of time, I'm going to focus on the interview part. There's some things to be said about CVs and not having typos on them, but mostly we'll just talk about the interviews. The interviews are really important, even for an intern. You just want to get a sense, A, that a person is personable and would be fun to work with, and B, for me, that they have some underlying design sense. And I think their 3 important things are practice and a depth of knowledge and a breadth of knowledge. So by practice, I mean literally practice interviewing. Do a mock interview. It may feel silly to do an interview with a fellow student or your mem, but it's worth it. And have them tell you what they think and work on it. You can even video yourself. It's terrifying to see yourself on video, but it is worth it. There's also a lot of information out there available on YouTube and blogs and books about good interview practices. Just make sure they're up to date because the meta of interviewing actually does change over time, sort of like a game. So just be up to date, practice, learn how to do Toastmaster, where they give you a subject and you make a speech in front of a bunch of people. It's not a bunch of people, but it's just as terrifying in some ways to do an interview. And if you're relaxed and confident, I will be relaxed and have more confidence in you. And if you're nervous, it actually makes it harder to kind of focus on what you're saying. So practice. By breadth of knowledge, I mean things that aren't directly related to game design. Someone wrote, and I totally agree, designers should know everything. And I believe that. If you're a trivia master, that's a good thing. Knowing a lot about a lot of things cannot but help in things like world design and just your general knowledge of the world. So it's good to have a breadth of knowledge. And also some specific things I would ask in an interview, for example, with an associate designer. Do you know the odds of rolling a 1 on 2 dice, of just 1 1 on 2 dice? Now, not knowing that doesn't mean, black mark, I'm not going to hire you, but it does help. It does give a little checkbox of niceness, because I say, oh, okay, they have an elementary understanding of statistics, and math and statistics are vital for good design for economies and combat and things like that. Also, the most important piece of software you can know how to use is Excel. I will ask, do you know what a pivot table is and why we use it? I'm not sure I even know the answer, but if you do, that's great, because we use Excel a lot. The test that Gary had to take for Digit was on Excel. We use Excel all the time in our designs. It's just a vital tool, and the more clever tricks you can do with Excel, the better. And finally, by depth of knowledge, I mean game knowledge in that case. And one way I'm going to get a sense of what your game design savvy is not by looking at written words, but by talking to you and having you answer questions about a game which we share a common knowledge of. And that's what's so important. I have a fairly broad range of games that I have played, but hopefully you do too. Do not limit yourself to certain types of games. Play a lot of different games. And the advice to do your research, absolutely spot on. Play the game that you are interviewing for. It's so vital. One of the first things, because multiple people will actually most likely interview. And when we get together for that summit at the end, we say, he didn't even play the game. He didn't know anything about our game. That is actually kind of a black mark. So play the game you're going for, but also play a bunch of others, because I can talk to you about that game, but I can also say, so do you play any Supercell games? Hey, let's talk about Clash of Clans. If you don't like the kinds of games that I'm familiar with, we have no common ground. It's not impossible for me to get a sense of your game design savvy and your underlying understanding of game design principles, but it's more difficult. And I also give this advice to everybody in the game design field: play games you don't like. If they are popular, then there is a reason. You may think they're stupid. You may think they're morally corrupt. Some people feel that way about free-to-play models. You may think that they're just not for you because you can't play them well. I have that problem with any kind of dexterity game. But you've got to have at least a common ground in games you don't like, because that's actually better for interviews. When I ask you what you think of this particular game, what's a system in that game that you admire, that you dislike? How would you change it? If you played a game you don't like, but you can understand why other people do, that's the key to everything, because that is empathy, your ability to put yourself in the shoes of other types of players. And that, I think, more than anything, is what I look for in a new associate designer. So there we have it. I think that's everything. Thank you again for inviting us.